Hello everyone, this is TechCuss again. In this video, I'm going to share different if function in Microsoft Excel one by one. So first, I will share straightforward if function. Then we'll go a little bit details of nested if function, and then I will combine if function with and or function to make it little bit complicated and solve little bit more complicated problems. Then I will use count if and count ifs function. Then I will use sum if function. I will also cover ifs function. Then finally if na, and we'll go details into if error function as well. And then combine VLOOKUP with if function to solve very complicated problem which cannot be solved with VLOOKUP function only. Then we'll add trim function with if function where if function cannot be used alone. And finally, I will use average if function. If function is really necessary when you want to do some logical operations for a large number of data points in Microsoft Excel, and to separate the data points from a specific range or limit, then if function is really necessary. So let's start how you can do the operation in Microsoft Excel by writing the function. Okay, so here you can see I have shown a number of students and their achieved mark in a subject, and the pass mark has been identified as 33. So I want to show for each of the students result as passed or failed. Okay, so for a small number of students you can do that manually, but for a large number of students it's very difficult to separate or to separate it manually. Okay, so then if function comes into operation. So let's start. So just click on the cell and start the equation just by writing the equation sign. Then you are going to write if. So as you can see, the suggested function has already showed here. So you are just going to click here and sorry. So if you click here, you see there are three different terms is being showed within the if function parenthesis. So first is logical test, value if true, and value if false. So for logical test, you are going to show if the pass mark is, if the achieved mark is less than 33, then he is going to fail. Okay, so how I'm going to write it? Let's start. So this is the mark what John received. So you are going to select this cell, and if this is greater than, so you are going to give a sign greater than, and if this is greater than the pass mark which is 33, so you are going to select this. Then if this is greater than 33, then what will happen? He will pass. Okay, so you are going to write passed here. So let's write passed, and as you have written a word here, you have to give inverted comma, then another comma, and after that value if false. So if the logical test is false, you are going to give the result as failed. So close the parentheses, then hit enter. Okay, now you see the result has generated as failed. Okay, so here you see I have given this E3 cell which is pass mark. You want to keep it fixed. Okay, so for keeping it fixed you have to add $, or you can press F4. So then what you are going to do, you are going to populate all the other cells with the same equation also. Okay, so just keep your bring your cursor here and then double click. You see this has generated all the results for all the students. Okay, so in our previous video I have shown how you can write straightforward if statement, but if you want to appoint grade for each of the student based on their marks, so this time you have little bit more options. Okay, so a straightforward if statement will not work in this case. Okay, so you have to apply nested if or if statement within a if statement. Okay, this is a little bit complicated, so let's start. So first I'm going to write the equation for John's achieved mark. So start by writing the equation sign, then write the if statement. You see, okay, so the logical test. Okay, so as you can see I have shown 5 grade distribution here, A, B, C, D, F. The this first I will start from A. So you will get grade A if your mark is greater than or equal to 90. So I'm going to write it for John. If C7, which is John's achieved mark, is greater than or equal to 90, then he got the grade A. But if he doesn't get greater than 90, what he will get? You have actually 4 different options here. So in this case, what you have to do, you have to write again another if statement. So again if, and in that if statement, you have to apply a logical test again. So if C7 is greater than or equal to, this time I'm going to write 70, and in that case he will get grade B. But if he gets less than 70, then you have to write another if statement, which is and apply the logical test again. C7, if C7 is greater than or equal to 50, then the grade is C. And you have to apply the if statement again and apply the logical test again. So if C7 is greater than or equal to 33 this time, then the grade would be D. Okay, so we are very end of our statement. So after D, there is only on. So if John gets less than 33, then there is only on grade available, that is F, which is 0 to 33. So we are going to write F here. So now there is another critical part. You have to close the statement. For closing the statement, you have to close the parenthesis for each of the if statement within if statement. Okay, so you can do by counting each of the parentheses, starting parentheses, and then give the same number of parentheses at the end to complete the statement. But this might be a little bit difficult when you are going to write a large statement. Okay, so what you can do or apply the technique, like if you will see that when I will apply the closed parentheses for each of the if statement, the corresponding starting parenthesis will be highlighted. Okay, so let's start. So you see this one was green and the green starting parenthesis was highlighted. So the next one highlighted this parenthesis, which is purple color, then the red one is going to be highlighted, and finally the black one. So we are done with the equation. Now if you press enter, you see the grade has been shown for John, which is grade C. And now if you populate all the cells for other students, you have to just bring your cursor here and double click, and you see all the grades has been populated for other students. So like Rob has got 20, which falls in the grade F, and it is shown grade F. Ron is 91 and he basically falls under the grade of A. Okay, so today I will show you how you can use and or function with if function in Microsoft Excel. So here you can see there are several students or candidates who have attended in a set of exams, which is physics and math, and based on this result we are going to select the candidates. Okay, so there are two conditions to select the candidates. First, the pass mark is 33. So if the candidate gets more than 33 in both physics and math, they will be selected, and they will not be selected if they get less than 33 in either physics or math. Okay, so let's start. So we are going to show the student or candidate will be selected if they get 33 in both physics and math. So let's write the equation for John first. First start the equation and start the function if. Here in the if function, first you have to write the logical test, and in this logical test you are basically not comparing only on value. You are going to compare two different subjects mark with the pass mark. Okay, so we are going to write and here. So in the logical test, you have started another logic, that is and in the and we are going to give first logical on, then logical to. So in the logical on, we are considering that if the physics mark, which is E7, is greater than or equal to 33, so lock the cell 33 by pressing F4. Then logic 2, which is math, and select F7 for that. Then it is greater than or equal to 33, so lock the cell, then close the parenthesis for AND function. So now you have got the logical test for if, and now if this logic is true, we are going to select the candidate. So we are going to select it, and if it is not true, we are not going to select the candidate. So not selected. Close the parenthesis and hit enter. So as you can see, John has got 20 in physics, and math. In math, he has got 45. So he has not been selected according to our given condition. Okay. So if you pull the equation for all the other candidates, you'll see that like all the candidates are not being selected other than Mike, because Mike has got 80 and 53, who is greater than 33 for both physics and math. So only Mike has been selected. Now, if we consider that we will select the candidate if they got higher than 33 in either physics or math. Okay, so instead of and, now we are going to use or function. Okay, so in that case, what you can do, just instead of and, if you write here or, okay, so we are going to keep everything same and press enter. So now you see that for John, as he has got 45 in math, which is greater than 33, so he has been selected, because now we have changed the condition that if any candidate gets higher than 33 in either physics or math, he will be selected. And if you drag this to all of the candidates, you see now other than Chris, all the candidates are selected. Chris is not selected because he has got 25 and 20 in physics and math, which are lower than 33 for both subjects. Okay, you can see a sales data of a store. There are actually 5 items: probiotic, roasted nut, oatmeal raisin, fortune cookie, and unsalted nut. And these 5 items are sold in this store. From the spreadsheet, we see that the items listed randomly. So like probiotic, then roasted nuts, it's haphazardly listed. Okay. So if we want to identify which item has been sold how many times, then we need to use count if function. So first we want to see how many times probiotic has been sold. Okay, so first probiotic. So to see that, let's write the equation. Start with equation sign, then write count if. So you have to write count if function, then click. So first you have to give the range. So for the range, we are selecting the range of this C column. Okay, so I have shown in my previous videos that how you can select large range. So just click here, then Control Shift, then down arrow, and now you have selected all the items in the column C. And so you have selected the range by giving $sign. Okay, so then you are going to give the criteria. So for the first case, our criteria is probiotic, because we are going to show how many times the probiotic item has been sold. So just select probiotic here. So by the way, if you write it probiotic here, you have to give inverted comma, because you are writing a text. Okay, as I have selected a cell which is written probiotic, then you don't need to give that. Okay, then close the parenthesis and hit enter. So this countif function has actually passed through this all cells of column C and identified that total 50 times the probiotic has been sold. Okay. Now, if I want to see how many roasted nut, oatmeal raisin, fortune cookie, or unsalted nut has been sold, then you have to. I have already written the function here. So what you have to do, just uh, double click here, and as you can see, the equation has been generated for all the other cells. So roasted nut is 39 times it has been sold. Uh, Oatmeal raisin, which is 272 times. And so as you can see, I have fixed this range, and the criteria, as I have selected probiotic for the first case, it has been automatically updated for the other cells. Okay. So that's how you can use countif function. So if you want to see how many times customer 1 has been customer 1 has bought probiotic or customer 2 has bought probiotic, this kind of details, then you need to insert additional details into your function. So in that case, you have to use count ifs instead of count if. So let's start. So first, you can see I have written count if function to identify total number of times sold probiotic. Now I'm going to write count ifs function. So for customer number 1, just start with equation sign, write count ifs, select this function. So then you are going to select the criteria range 1. Okay. So the criteria range 1, this is going to be the same thing what we have selected last time, this product. So let's start selecting that. So Control Shift down arrow. So you have selected all the range of the product. So I'm going to log this cell. So because I'm going to use this equation for other cell as well. So I'm going to keep the range same for other equation. Okay. So then you are going to select the criteria 1. So the criteria 1 is probiotic. So you are going to select probiotic. So that's actually mimic your countif function until the countif function. Now you are going to give additional criteria. So now I'm going to additional criteria range. So which is going to be the additional criteria range? I'm going to select all the customer range cell, which is column A. Okay. So Control Shift down arrow, and you are going to select until this. Okay. So like the earlier time, I'm going to place $sign to fix the cell. Okay. So then you are going to write what's your criteria 2. Okay. So in this case, I am going to write inverted comma equal to 1, because I am going to select which one is actually customer number 1, and from that criteria I'm going to select how many times customer 1 has bought probiotic. So then you can just close the parenthesis and hit enter. Okay. So you see the value has been generated 6. So customer 1 has bought 6 times the probiotic. Okay. So the same thing you can do for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this equation. So this time instead of customer 1, I'm going to write customer 2. Okay. So what's happening here? Okay. So you have to actually okay. So basically this should be J2. So I should have actually logged this cell as well, the probiotic one, so that I could copy this for. Okay, so just log this. Okay, now copy this to next of the cell. Okay, so here you are going to write 3, then 4. You can automate this if you want, but just for this time I'm not going to automate it. So 5. Okay. So as you can see, The customer 1 has bought 6 times. Probiotic has been bought by customer 1 is 6 times. For customer 2, it is 12 times. For customer 3, it is 11 times. For customer 4, 11 times. And customer 5 is 10 times. And if you sum it up, you will see that. So sum this range. Okay. So which is 50. Okay. So you can apply the same equation for roasted nut to see how many times customer 1 bought it. So let's copy this equation to rest of the cell. Okay, so you see it is showing 6. Okay, because you have to change the equation a little bit. Okay, instead of J20 you have to you have to write here J21 actually, which is roasted nut. Okay, so now you see it has been it has been selected and showed how many times customer 1 has bought roasted nut, which is 2 times. And if you go until the very end, okay, sorry for that, so select this equation. So instead of 1, just write 2, instead of 1 write 3, then 4, and finally 5. Okay, so if you sum it up, which is 39. Okay, so same way you can do this for oatmeal raisin. For oatmeal raisin it would be J22 actually. Okay, so 33, and you can copy until here and write it 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally 5. Okay, so if you sum it up, it is 272. So I hope you have understood how you can apply this count ifs function to identify additional details or give additional criteria within count if you want to calculate the sum from the sales data. It's very easy. Like you can write sum function, then start with the parenthesis and then select all this data. Okay, so this is very easy and you can get the total revenue from all of these different products. Okay, but if you want to calculate a specific product revenue, for instance, if I want to calculate the revenue earned only from probiotic, which is the first product listed here, and so that is a little bit tricky, and here the sum if function comes into operation. So you can easily do that by using sum if function. And let's start. So here I'm going to write the probiotic revenue earned from probiotic. So for doing that, just start the equation by writing sum if. So you can see a suggested function has been shown. So after selecting the sum if function, first you have to select the range from where you are going to give the criteria. So I'm going to select all of the product range. So just select all the product range, and as you can see all the product range has been selected. Now you are going to enter comma, and after that you are going to select criteria. So what criteria would be used for selecting the sum range? Okay, so my criteria here is actually probiotics, so you can write it here. And as you know that when you want to write a text, you have to give inverted comma. Okay, so you have to check the spelling correctly, probiotic. Okay, so then comma, and then you are going to select the sum range. For selecting the sum range, I'm going to select this revenue and then close the parenthesis. Okay, and hit enter. Okay, so now you can see the probiotic revenue generated from probiotic has been calculated here. Okay, so I can do the same operation for roasted nut or oatmeal raisin. Okay, so for roasted nut you can write like sum if, then select the range here, then comma, criteria is roasted nut. So instead of writing roasted nut, I can select directly roasted nut from here. Then you can place the comma and then select the revenue and hit parenthesis. Okay, so just to check if it is correctly calculated, you can do the previous operation and write like roasted nut, then select this revenue range and hit enter. Okay, so we have got the revenue generated from roasted nut. And same thing for actually here you don't have to write it. I think if you just press your cursor here and double click, it will give you the value. To check, just for instance, for verification, I am going to show you how you can check. So here oatmeal raisin, okay, and then going to select the revenue. Okay, so that's how you can generate or calculate the revenue generated from each of the product from a large amount of data. And for instance, if you want to calculate the cost for each of the product, you can also do the same operation. In my previous several videos, I have shown you how you can use if statement and as well as nested if statement, where you can use if statement within a if statement. But for nested if statement, there is some problem in that logical test, because you have to count lots of parentheses, and using if statement within an if statement is very difficult for new users. So basically in Excel, Microsoft Excel 2000, after 2019, the if statement has been added to Microsoft Excel, and also Office 365 has this operation, and it's very easy for new users to use if statement instead of using nested if. So I'm going to calculate the grade for each of the students based on or by using if statement. So let's start. So first you have to click on the cell, then start the equation by using equation, and then write if and then s. So as you can see, the suggested ifs function has been shown, so just click on there. So first it will show you some suggested operations. So you have to give logical test on. So for logical test on, we are going to give John's mark, which is E7. If it is greater than or equal to 90, then the value, if the logical test 1 is true, would be grade A. So in nested if statement or function, what we used to do, that we used to write another if function here. But here for ifs function, what you have to do, you don't have to go through that complex procedure. You have to just write the logical test 2. So for logical test 2, we can just write E7, which is John's mark. If it is greater than or equal to 70, then the value would be B, if it is true. So now logical test 3, the same procedure as logical test 2. So if John's mark E7 is greater than or equal to 50, then the value would be C. Now logical test 4. So for logical test 4, we are going to do the same thing. E7 is greater than or equal to 33, then the grade would be D. And the final logical test for our case, which is logical test 5, if E7 is greater than, actually is shorter than, here is shorter than 33, then the candidate actually failed, so the grade is F. So you can now close the parenthesis. So you see, it's a very simple equation rather than using nested if equation. Okay, and the way the equation works, actually, when it will goes through the different logical test, first if this logical test is true, then it will give this value and it will ignore the all other logical tests. Okay, so that's how it will operate. Okay, just press enter, and you see it has shown the grade C for John. And if you just pull the equation for other cell just by double clicking here, So you see Rob has failed because he has got 20, Chris has failed because he has got 25, Mike has got B because he has got 80. Okay, so if I change Chris's number, like instead of giving 25, if I give 35 and press enter, so you see the equation has been changed, as well as the result has been changed, and the grade has been like updated to grade D. Why you need to use if error function in Microsoft Excel? You can see from this spreadsheet there are several salesmen's data are shown. So column E shows total sales of each of the salesmen, and column F shows what are their respective profit. So if you want to calculate the percent of profit, what you have to do, basically you have to write the equation, which is profit divided by sales multiplied by 100. So that shows the percent of profit each of the salesmen make from their total sales. So if you drag and drop until the very end, you see there are several sales are showing division by 0 or hash value. So basically these are showing because let's say this is for a single month and Rob did not do any sale in that month, and the profit is obviously 0 for that month as well. So that's why it is showing you division by 0. Okay, so this is kind of undefined. Same thing can happen for Mike, like accidentally for profit column you have when you give the input, you have written a letter instead of a numerical value for profit. That was accidental. Okay, so that also gives you something like a error. Okay, but if you want to sum up this value, that will create additional error. So basically if you write the equation sum to sum up all this value, it's showing you some kind of error due to the error in different cells. Okay, so to solve this kind of issue, you can use if error function in Microsoft Excel. Okay, so what you have to basically do, write if error function. Then there are two logical arguments here. First is the value, and second is value if error. So for value, you are going to write the same equation what you have written for percent of profit. So that would be basically profit divided by total sale multiplied by 100, then period value if error. So you are basically going to write 0 if the value is error, and then hit enter. That's giving the exact number for percent of profit, which is 40. And if you extend your equation until the end, so you can see that you can change number until 2 decimal point. So you can see that for undefined cell, it is showing you 0. And the same thing happened for Mike, that is also replacing the error by 0. Okay, so if you use the sum function for this case and sum it up, that's giving you the summation results. Okay, so it's basically replacing the undefined or error value from your cell and replacing that, and that's how it's giving you a numerical value if you do additional operation from that cells. Okay, and another good thing of if error function, you can replace the 0 with other characters, like for instance, if you want to write here error, just by using quotation mark you can write that. Okay, so if you write error here, so basically if you drag until the end, so you see the undefined and as well as the error cell has been replaced by a numerical, by a letter, like by a word something like error. Okay, and that is not affecting your summation formula as well. Okay, so that's how you can use if error function to replace or replace the error or undefined from the cell and do additional operation. Why you want to use if na in Microsoft Excel? So if na is another logical operation in MS Excel, and as you can see from the expression, if na basically returns the value you specify if the expression resolves to NA. Otherwise, returns the result of the expression. So this is basically resolves the NA when when any operation returns the NA in your Microsoft Excel. Here you can see a real example where in a shop, column B shows the identification number of different salesmen, and column D shows the units sold by each of the salesmen. And by using VLOOKUP table, I have identified different identification numbers cell accordingly. So here you can see the column K shows different identification number that is basically coming from the column B. So here it doesn't include all the identification number. It consists of several identification number. For instance, you got it from different store, but the identification number, total identification number is shows here. Okay. So, and now I want to show what is the sales value of each of the identification number from this table and merge it here. Okay, so here I have used VLOOKUP for that application. Here you can see some of the sales of the identification number column is basically not giving any identification number, so that's why it's giving NA. Okay, so for instance, you can write something wrong here that can also give you NA. Okay, so if that identification number, for instance, if I write it 9000 and 9000 is not available here in this identification number column, so that will also return NA from using the VLOOKUP application in Microsoft Excel. So that can happen, but the problem is that when you want to calculate the total number of sales by this identification number, you just use the sum function and then take this, and that also returns NA. So basically this NA is affecting all your subsequent calculation. Okay, so you cannot do any other operation from this value. Okay, so in those kind of situation, if NA is very useful. So what I can do, I can add a if NA function, and then if NA function has two arguments, one is value. So for the value, I'm going to write the VLOOKUP function, what I have written already. So next, what would be the value if NA? So I'm going to return 0. So if you press enter, you see where there was NA, that basically replaced by 0, and that also gives or return your total sales value. So that's how you can resolve this. Okay, so now if I give another value from here to here, so it automatically updates to that specific value, and the total sales is also updated. Sometimes it needs to add trim function with if function. For example, here is a table shows a test results of some employees in a company, and based on their test result, if they have passed or failed, based on that their promotion will be determined. We can easily do that by using a simple if function. So to start that, just write if, then the logical test, if the cell is equal to passed, then promoted, and if the value is false, then not promoted. Don't forget to add the quotation mark if you write a word. Okay, so hit enter. So based on John's test results, he has promoted, and if you drag to all the other cells, okay, so here you can see some of the problems, like if someone failed in the test, he will not be promoted, but if he passed in the test, he would be promoted. But if Amy has passed the test, but from this equation as it shows, she has not been promoted according to the equation. So why this is showing that? Because sometimes when you give the input, you accidentally can add additional spaces in front of the word that can create an issue. So to solve that, what you have to do, basically trim has to be added within if function. So let's say here you can just add trim here, and within that you can keep the text, then hit enter. So if you extend this equation for other cells, you see now it has been fixed for ed as well as AMI. So that's how you can fix the extra space problem in Microsoft Excel when you use if function. VLOOKUP and if function can be used together. The combination is mainly done for multiple reasons, such as to handle errors to look up based on multiple values. Here we can see that some students' mark in math and English are shown in a school. So now we want to make a lookup table where we will give input of student's name and the corresponding subjects, and it will return the mark of each of the students in that specific subject. So do that, we can write the VLOOKUP equation. So here you see I'm going to write it again so that makes more sense. So if you write the VLOOKUP function and the lookup value, you are going to look up the name, and the table array, you are going to select this table array, and the column index. So here, for instance, I'm going to see the number or mark in math, so column 2, and we want exact match, so we can write false and close the parenthesis and hit enter. Now you see Amy got 20 in maths, so that is showing. But if you change the subject, for instance, you want to see what has Amy got in English. So from this drop down, if you select English, this is not changing because you need to consider additional or multiple input in this VLOOKUP table. So how you can resolve this? That's when you can combine if function with VLOOKUP. So let's write the if function, and here you see first you have to give the logical test, and I'm going to give the logical test for J6, which is the subject. So the cell J6, just select J6, is equal to, for instance, I'm writing math. So if the subject or J6 is equal to math, then you will consider this VLOOKUP table value. Okay. So, but if the value is false, so for instance, instead of math, if the subject is English, then you have to write another VLOOKUP table. So what I can do, just copy this and paste it here. So everything remains same, but instead of column 2, I want to look for column 3 now, which is marked in English. So close the parenthesis and now hit enter. So you see now it has been updated for the corresponding subject for corresponding name. So now if I select math, the mark achieved by Amy in math is 20. Now if you select different name from here, for instance, I want to see the mark of Jake. So Jake got 80 in math. If I check it from here, Jake, he has got 80 in math, and if I select English, he has got actually 82. Okay. The average if function is used to calculate an average of all cells in a given range that meet a certain condition. The spreadsheet you see shows some students achieved mark in a subject. So we want to average out the past students mark and the failed students mark. To do that effectively, we have to use a function which is average if function. So average if function has 3 components. So if I write it here average if, you can see the first component is range, and which actually defines the cells that you want to apply the criteria against. The second component is the criteria, which is used to determine which cells to average. And the average range, the last component, it is the cells to average. So if I write the equation to average out the past students mark first, let's start the equation and write average if. Start the parenthesis. First you have to define the range, and the range would be basically you are defining pass or failed, and to make it simpler to use the equation for the next cell as well, just fix the cell of the range. So press F4, press F4 again. Then the criteria. So our criteria for the first case is past. So I'm going to select this cell which is written past. And if you write down past, you have to give a quotation mark. Then enter comma and average range. So here we are going to average the mark. So we are going to average the column D, basically the achieved mark. So then end the parenthesis and hit enter. So as you can see, the average for the past students achieved mark has shown 70.94. If you apply this equation, so before applying this equation, I want to fix this cell as well for the average range. So press F4, hit enter. Okay. So now if you drag this equation to the next cell, that is giving you the average mark of the failed students as well. Okay. So it basically takes all the failed students and all the past students mark from this table and average it out according to your criteria. So these are all the functions I covered as a different application of if function in Microsoft Excel. So don't forget to like, comments and subscribe if you like my videos. Thank you for your appreciation.